Now, a key part of the government's narrative as well is that not only were these four men supposedly not known to the security services before 7/7, they were also allegedly acting completely alone. They were, what did they call them, homegrown, self-radicalizing suicide bombers. But at each stage of their journey on the morning of 7/7, we have witnesses in Leeds, in Luton, and in London who, to some extent, recognised these men being in the place that the Home Office narrative says they were, and at the times that the Home Office narrative says they were, but each witness saw at least one additional person alongside them at each point in the journey. So we are left, of course, with the question of, if these men were responsible, were there co-conspirators? And if they weren't responsible, who were these additional people alongside them? And did they play some role in setting them up to look like terrorists? You also have the question of the martyrdom videos, the so-called martyrdom videos produced by Mohammed Sadiq Khan and Shehzad Tanweer. Now, some people have questioned those videos' authenticity, and I admit I have my doubts. But even if they are authentic, for one thing, we only have two videos. We have no video from Junaid Lindsay, we have no video from Hasib Hussain. If this was a conspiracy of four men who all radicalised each other, then presumably they would all be making videos declaring their willingness to martyr themselves in the name of Islam or whatever. And then you have the content of these videos, which is ambiguous, to say the least. In neither of the videos, in Khan or Tanweer's videos, do they make any mention of attacking London, let alone the tube stations, the tube network, let alone through the form of suicide bombings. And after all, if you're a terrorist, there's many different ways by which one could carry out an attack that doesn't involve killing oneself. So we have no establishment of intent, and we have no establishment of motive. And in particular, in the second film that I made, I tried to look at the criminal investigation and how it was conducted and how they made the conclusions and how they came to the narrative that they did come to. And as I say, the most fundamental issues in any criminal investigation would be establishing who was responsible, establishing how they did it, and establishing why they did it. And in the answers to each of these three main issues, main questions, we are left with a yawning chasm of non-evidence, of contradiction, of diversions, and of forensic, well, sloppiness would be to put it mildly, but it seems that they basically just sort of made this whole thing up. They tried to establish intent through the so-called martyrdom videos that don't really mention martyrdom and certainly don't mention anything about bombing the London Underground. They answer the question of the means by saying that they were initially military explosives and then saying they were homemade explosives, but they've never really been able to give a conclusive account of how these bombs were made. And in terms of who was responsible, they have only ever accused four men who are presumably dead, against whom there is virtually no case whatsoever. So we are left with far, far more questions than we have answers to. And I will echo very much what Bridget said about J7, that there is a trap here that we can fall into, whereby we try and construct an alternative narrative based around a lack of evidence of what actually happened. And that is not only dangerous, it's very foolhardy, because if we're wrong, we are wasting everyone's time. And not just wasting everyone's time, but we are providing targets to the likes of the BBC Conspiracy Files, to the likes of whoever it is who wants to debunk conspiracy theories. We are feeding them conspiracy theories to debunk. And if we don't have the evidence, then we're setting ourselves up for a fall. Now, I I admit I am, a bit of a conspiracy theorist. I wouldn't be stood here talking to you if I wasn't. I wouldn't be here today. I'm sure everyone else in the audience is too. But conspiracy theories in this sort of situation, where a mass murder crime has occurred, they are only useful insofar as they offer a hypothesis for exploration and investigation in exactly the same way as a police hypothesis of a crime should be used. You look at the evidence, you maybe draw up a sort of schematic hypothesis of what could have happened, and you test that against further evidence, and you test that against further evidence and information that you can obtain by investigating. That's fine. That's, in fact, an extremely productive way to approach this. But what we should be very careful of is letting our imagination run away with us, and so we get to a point where all we're really doing is cherry-picking little bits from here and there that support what we want to believe really happened.